a lot of progress toward ensuring that essential information about credentials, competencies, pathways, quality outcomes, and connections to jobs and occupations is all openly available on the web, as well as using digital credentials to help people have more control over their own learning records. So now is really the important time to make sure that these learning records that we're issuing digitally contain relevant and machine actionable data. Linked Open Data in the Credential Transparency Description language provides structure to describe all different types of credentials and skills, and this really empowers people to use them on their learning and career pathways. So this is what we'll cover in this presentation. And first, the importance of credential and competency transparency. So many of you know who we are. Credential Engine is a nonprofit. Our mission is to create credential transparency to reveal the credential marketplace, to increase credential literacy, and really to empower everyone to make more informed decisions about credentials and their value. Our openly available tools and services provide a common infrastructure for providing credential and competency data available on the web. And you can do that with our systems, with your systems, and openly on the web. We provide a common language to describe education and workforce data so that there can be apples to apples comparisons. And that language is the Credential Transparency Description language. We're working a great deal in policy to support credential transparency. We offer open technologies that allow anyone to access credential and competency information. And we do all of this to enable an open marketplace for customized applications and tools that use this information. It's also important to note what we do not do, especially since we're talking today about the topic of learning records, because at Credential Engine, we do not collect or verify personally identifiable information. We don't issue credentials, and we don't verify issued credentials. So our research has identified over 738,000 unique credentials being offered in the US. That's across post-secondary, alternative learning, training providers, certification and licensure, secondary, etc. This vast array of credentials isn't actually a bad thing. This reflects our changing economy, and people, especially now, need many different ways of upskilling and continuously evolving in their careers. So we need many different types of credentials for ongoing learning, and that leads to new additional credentials in a lot of cases. But how can anyone understand how to navigate the options among all these diverse credentials? So Credential Engine's work is important now more than ever, because in the rapidly changing world of learning and work, the number and types of credentials and credential issuers are growing faster than our ability to make sense of this marketplace. Any and all different types of credentials from different providers can be valuable to the people who earn them, but they can also be dead ends or misleading or mismatched, and unfortunately they can waste time and money. The fact is that this is a dynamic and constantly changing marketplace where the credentials vary in content, quality, value, relevance. Sometimes they lead to career pathways, sometimes they stack to other credentials, but it's generally not clear or transparent how that works. There's currently a lack of clarity about what's inside all of these credentials: competencies, the costs, the occupational alignments, connections, and comparisons with other credentials. So technology can help provide much better transparency, but until Credential Engine developed the Credential Transparency Description language, there was no common language or technology infrastructure that included all different types of credentials. Today, we really have unprecedented opportunities to rebuild how our education, training, and employment systems and processes work together to create valuable pathways. We can make credentials and competencies transparent. We can help employers understand the match between credentials and competencies and job skills. We can help federal and state agencies use common data structures so they can more effectively help people get back to work. And we can help learners and workers communicate what they know and can do and help improve their equitable access to education and jobs. So how do we empower stakeholders in our learn and work ecosystems to achieve these goals? The stakeholders can come together in learn and work ecosystems, and they can work together to achieve this credential, competency, and employment record transparency. This diagram helps us see how those credential and competency data can be used to communicate among stakeholders who are connected in these learn and work ecosystems. So I'll come back to this diagram a little later in the presentation for a fuller explanation, but the key point right now is that all of these stakeholders need to, quote, speak common open data languages and be able to meaningfully exchange data. Part of the problem now is that different stakeholders use different data structures that aren't connected. Linked open data, which I'll explain in more detail, can bridge across education and training, quality assurance, employment, and importantly, can bridge into the credentials and digital records that are issued to individuals. This part of the ecosystem in the gold box is what we're focusing on today. Individual learner workers earn these credentials. The digital credentials and learner records issued to an individual include structured linked open data. Then those records can link back to rich interconnected data about the credential issuer, the competencies, quality assurance, occupational alignments, and much, much more. There's been a lot of progress in the past few years in using digital credentials to help people have more control over their own records of their learning achievements. Now it's time to make sure those records include relevant and machine actionable data. So there's momentum behind digital learner worker records. They're called by various names, including interoperable learning records, comprehensive learner records, badges, etc. In particular, there's growing acknowledgement that learners are workers and workers are learners. So people need to be able to collect their achievements and skills from multiple sources. Records from multiple sources include credentials, skills, military records, work experience, community learning, and a lot of other valuable information. So important characteristics of these records are that they're digital, verifiable, secure, that they can be shared by the individual and controlled so that the individual's privacy is protected, and so that the records are only shared when and with whom they choose. And interoperable, which means that they need to be transferable and machine actionable across education and employment systems and processes. That can seem pretty abstract. So how do these digital records actually work? Well, different organizations, education, training, employer, military, community organizations, issue records to the individuals. The individual collects these records in a wallet, air quotes, wallet or digital backpack or whatever that they control. And then the individual can curate sets of records, and they decide how and with whom to share these records, for example, in professional and social profiles and in applications for education and employment. The diagrams you see here are a simple visual of a phone app where the individual in this first frame can see an overview of their credentials, skills, and jobs. And then when they click on a credential in the second frame, they see more information about that credential. And if they go into even further detail in the third frame, they see the competencies included in that credential. An app like this would also include other features, like features for individuals to receive and verify their credentials, for sharing them, for choosing specific records to put in applications. And apps like this are being built as we speak. An app like the diagram in the prior slide enables the individual to do some pretty powerful things with their own records. These same uses can be provided through web interfaces, custom tools, integration with education employment systems, etc. But these are some of the key ways that they can use them. They can collect and curate their records. They can have a better understanding of their own skills and how that relates to their exploration of career opportunities. They can include those records in an online profile and use them in applications for education and employment, and importantly, to manage their own career advancement and transition with better understanding of what their learning achievements and skills are. There's powerful uses for employers also. They can search and discover job candidates, including passive candidates, people who haven't actually applied for the job, by looking for people who have shared their data and those people match the competencies and credentials and other hiring requirements of that employer. Employers can improve their application processes in terms of how they screen and verify credentials and skills, and that can make it easier to do skills-based hiring. This is really important because skills-based hiring does not screen people out based on a missing credential match. So it gives people opportunities because they don't get eliminated in that first cut. It can make onboarding of new employees more efficient so that employers know what skills someone already has records of. And it helps them analyze their workforce training so they can improve how they handle reskilling and upskilling. Some of the opportunities for education and training organizations include the ability to search and discover potential students, including potential students who haven't applied to the institution if a person has shared that information. That can include offering enrollment based on skill and credential gaps. The education institution can receive relevant, detailed, transparent, and verifiable enrollment application information. That helps them also offer students transfer value for advanced standing based on their records. And importantly, education and training organizations can help students complete those programs more efficiently, can reduce the need for people to retake courses and assessments for which they already have the records of skills. And all of this adds up to better communication about education and career pathways, including dynamic alignment to constantly changing job circumstances. But even as we consider these many opportunities of even the most basic implementations of digital records, we have to ask ourselves, what actually makes these digital records valuable? When we consider the big picture and the long term, we need to address now the fact that learner worker records are only as valuable as the information they communicate. Therefore, let's not make huge investments in issuing digital credentials that just deliver digital versions of clunky, opaque, traditional records. Let's not waste our time collecting and exchanging records that can't be meaningfully used across systems and on the web. Let's make now the time to move beyond PDFs and buckets of words. Because if you look at where we are today, traditional records often don't include very much information or useful information anyway. They might have a training program description or course IDs on a transcript. Traditional records are generally siloed and can only be used and read and interpreted in a specific type of system, like a student information system or human resource information system, but not both. And combining records from these different types of sources is generally impossible or at best cumbersome. So, next slide. So we need to make learner records valuable so that they communicate clear, actionable, relevant information that is structured and can be combined and compared from diverse sources. Today we have the opportunity and we have the tools to have these records include rich data. For example, full information about the credential skills and learning assessments. The data can be interoperable and can be read, interpreted across different types of systems and on the open web. And the data can be actionable so that people and systems can do useful things with it, as distinct from opaque info that you can't really do anything with, like a course code on a transcript. All of this so that those records from diverse sources can be meaningfully compared, curated, combined. So to communicate valuable information about the credentials and competencies an individual has achieved, we need to use structured linked open data. This enables us to connect records from diverse sources to each other, connect records to education and training opportunities, as well as occupations and jobs, build education and career pathways, and make data in the records machine actionable across systems and on the open web. To provide the value of structured open data for learner and worker records, Credential Engine's approach is to use what has worked in so many other industries like retail, hospitality, hotels, air travel, maps, lots of others, and that is to use linked open data. There are important differences between linked open data and data that's designed for system integrations. Many different open standards structure information for system-to-system data exchange and data ingestion. So that means that one system can be configured to, quote, talk to one or more other systems, while the systems themselves, in most cases, keep their internal proprietary data structure. The diagram of boxes here shows an abstract representation of specific data flows that are configured system to system. Now, this type of interoperability is critically important, especially for providing integrations between different types of systems, like educational student information systems and employers' human resource systems. Those systems aren't going away, and systems integrations between them are extremely important. But linked open data provides vastly broader opportunities for interoperability, including the power of linking learner-worker records to structured data anywhere on the web from any source. Linked open data is just like links between web pages, only it links data. The round visual here shows an abstract representation of countless different points of linked data. Linked open data is humanly readable, machine actionable, and web searchable. Anyone can create links to anyone else's data that's been published or shared on the web. It really is as simple as creating links to web pages, but it's connecting points of data that can then communicate with each other and create meaningful, useful interactions. It's like when your map tells you the hours for a nearby restaurant. Your records of credentials and skills could tell you about a nearby job opening if you opted in to an app or another tool that let you control this type of data sharing. So imagine the power of linked open data that enables us to not only provide interoperability for integrations between systems, but also develop web searches, apps, and discovery tools that make use of dynamic data on the web. Credential Engine's been working on developing linked open data structures for credentials for over 5 years. The result is the openly available Credential Transparency Description Language, or CTDL. The work requires experts to agree on these many, many definitions of key terms and their structure in relation to each other. So we've done this through an open consensus-based process that includes experts from education, employment, government, community, and many other arenas. Every word for every term has been roundly debated and is very intentional. We've used this process to define over 500 terms, and the CTDL is continuously evolving as valuable new use cases are defined. And it's not just a bunch of terms. There's a grammar to CTDL that controls how the terms can be combined to describe different aspects of a credential. So I'm not going to go into all the details, but you can imagine that the connections can be usefully complex in describing many different types of credential and competency components, including linking between credentialing organizations, credentials, competencies, programs, courses, assessments, pathways, quality assurance, occupations, job skills, etc. Credential Engine's developed open technology services to help credential providers use CTDL, including an open registry for publishing credentials and competencies on the web. And Gina will talk more about that shortly. The real benefit of linked open data is that it can be understood by both humans and machines. For example, here, you see CTDL terms are used to describe a dental assisting certificate offered from an accredited institution, and it requires students to demonstrate a particular competency. This data can all be interpreted in real time by web apps and search engines. By using more CTDL terms, more information about the certificate can be expressed, including connections to occupations and links to data from other sources like job boards with listings for dental assistants. When we dig a little deeper into how the linked open data works, we also see the value of globally unique identifiers, because each component in the CTDL structure has a unique identifier that can be linked to from anywhere on the web, including across different data providers. So these identifiers for credentialing organizations, quality assurance organizations, credentials, competency frameworks, competencies, occupational frameworks, job skills can all connect to each other. So here the example is linking the dental assisting certificate to the Department of Labor ONET occupation of dental assistants, which in turn can link to specific employers and specific jobs on the open web. That's also rather abstract, so let's go back to the visualization. How does this work in the app that we were looking at before? So the learner records can link to CTDL data. The links use the globally unique identifiers on the open web to power this record with rich descriptions of the credentials and competencies earned by the individual. That allows records from multiple learners to reference the same credential and competency data on the web, which not only reduces data duplication and maintenance, but enables powerful search queries, comparisons, and even data analytics. So when the individual is looking at their list of credentials in the first frame, they can click through to more information about the credential, which you see in the next frame. And that more information is provided by the CTDL Linked Open Data. They can click again to the third frame for further detail about their competencies, and that's also in CTDL. And the data can link out to other sources and connections, such as the ONET occupational alignments of their credentials and the connections between their competencies and the skills required for job roles. So apps like this and/or web interfaces can connect to other types of data, including job search apps, career coaching apps, pathway exploration tools, and many other things. That lets a person explore and understand the links in their own achievement records, empowering anyone to find or define their own individualized pathways. They're not boxed into the data that's available in a specific system. Learner records become valuable when they communicate clear, actionable, relevant information, which is more powerful when that information is linked open data. Because then the records do include rich data, full information about a credential, the skills, the learning assessment, quality assurance, the occupational alignments. The data is linked on the open web. Records from diverse sources can be meaningfully compared and combined. And the information can be kept up to date and connected across higher ed and workforce agencies, education and training organizations, and employers, letting us all navigate links between education competencies and job skills, and most importantly, for learners, workers, educators, and employers to all be empowered with the context they need to make informed decisions about education and career pathways. So now we return to this diagram to see in more detail how credential and competency data can be used to communicate among stakeholders and ecosystems. It's important to keep in mind that linked open data transparency is not dependent on having hundreds of thousands of credentials and competencies described using CTDL. The important thing is that relevant stakeholders in this ecosystem or any ecosystem have data that's relevant to their needs. So the ecosystem connections you're seeing here could be applied, for example, across all the credentials offered in the state, or they could be applied to a specific program at a specific institution and how that institution collaborates with specific employers that they've identified as partners. So how does it work? Here in the middle, you see the credential and competency data in the credential transparency description language, which can be stored in the Credential Registry and or embedded in web pages or other web apps. Credentialing organizations like colleges and universities publish their own credential and competency data to the registry. Quality assurance bodies such as accreditors also publish information about their organizations and the credentials and or credentialing organizations for which they review quality. Employers can publish information about their organizations and the credentials and competencies they endorse as meeting their needs, including linking them to their job roles. And at the bottom left, you see the individual learner workers who earn credentials and are issued learner records. As I said in the beginning, Credential Engine does not collect or track information about individuals or the credentials that have been issued to them. But the connection between learner records and the Credential Registry is that the records issued to a learner can include CTDL and links to the unique identifiers of the credentials and competencies in the registry. Then people, systems, apps, web tools can all use those identifiers to link back to the full set of data about the credential issuer, et cetera. So that rich data is included in the record. It's a lot of work to build connected learn and work ecosystems, but we're all in this together. There are many different communities and initiatives working together, such as more than 36 being tracked, described, and connected to each other by the Lumina Foundation. And collectively, these initiatives help us all deliver a broader impact. And now I will turn it over to Jeannie.
Thank you, Deb. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the Credential Engine technologies and a new interoperable learner worker record guide that's available for anyone to utilize. As Deb talked about, to unlock the power of credentials, skills, competency information, and more, we've established the schemas, but we've also established the infrastructure and the Credential Registry services for connecting into those larger ecosystems. When we do this by leveraging the power of technology and the strength of our partners who create the clarity, the connectivity, and value for anyone and everyone who uses educational workforce data, whether it's to inform policy, make hiring decisions, set strategic goals, create social and economic change, as Deb talked about, to power learner worker records, and to make information transparent, comparable, and shareable, whether it's in the web or across other systems and applications. So among those tools, we have a set of publishing tools that includes a publishing assistant API, options to bulk upload, options for manual entry of information. And what all these tools do is they take information that's otherwise not linked open data and make it easy to make that conversion into linked open data, of course, based on the CTDL schemas, and put that data in the Credential Registry, but also give that data back to the users to use in their own environment and their own tools. And with the registry, the advantage is all that data is linked in the registry, available for anyone to use with their systems and applications, with their interoperable learner worker records, fostering an open applications marketplace. And for those of you who are not familiar with this kind of information, we also have a credential finder, and the credential finder is available for anyone to use to take a look at all the data once it has been published to the registry, so you can get a really good feel for the type of data that's in there and what it looks like. And if you go ahead and go on to the next slide. So in terms of using all those tools that I just talked about, there we have guides, we have instructions. So no matter how you're using the tools, whether it's manually entering information or using APIs, there are guides and instructions for you. We have just released a new interoperable learner worker record guide available on the Credential Engine technical site. The guide really is for anyone to read. There is also some technical information in there that's very helpful. There was a question earlier in the chat about how, for example, we work with other data standards organizations. And that's part of the job of this guide, is to talk about things such as using the CTDL data for your data design, using CTDL with other standards such as IMS global standards, referencing registry data in an interoperable learner worker record, and a whole lot more. That guide will be frequently updated, so watch for updates as we work with, for example, other data standards organizations, and as we all learn more together. Earlier in the webinar, when you answered the polling question about where you were in the process, many of us are still learning. Making these learner worker records far more valuable is new to many of us. So we will be working on that as new technologies come along, as new data standards evolve, specifications for recommendations for securing those records, sharing those records, and of course, using the CTDL with them to provide rich data, rich information about credentials, about competencies, and other information that makes that more valuable. Deb, if you go on to the next slide. So you can power your records with the CTDL, and wherever you are in the process, there's a launching point for including CTDL and the benefits of linked open data. Whether you're in an exploration stage, you're working on contracts with developers to create interoperable records for you, you're in a design phase, you're piloting, or you're even implementing, it's not too late. It's a good time to look at the benefits of using the CTDL and linked open data. And the new guide covers that full range of how you can ensure that your requirements specify the CTDL and linked open data to make them more valuable to individuals, employers, and credentialing organizations. And Deb, if you'll go ahead and go to the next slide. So regardless of where you are, if you're just learning or if you're implementing, we have some resources for you. We have some next steps that you can take. If you're learning, you can subscribe to our news and resources. And you can join our technical advisory group, for example, and there's other community efforts that are going on that welcome your participation. Don't worry, this PowerPoint will be sent to you afterwards, and you'll be able to follow those links and join these groups, subscribe to Credential Engine news and so forth. Advocate. It's important to get the word out and talk about how we can really improve this information to be more valuable and beneficial. And you can do that by sharing the guide. This PowerPoint will also be made available to you to remix and reuse and share. We encourage that. You can share other technical and communications resources. And if you have other ideas, feel free to share them in the chat. We can partner. We are always looking for partners. We understand the power of partnerships. We're all in this together. Let us know if you feel like there's an opportunity to work together in the realm of interoperable learner worker records. And finally, Deb, if you go to the final slide, we all need to act. You can use the credential transparency description language. You can use those tools that I went over, the publishing tools and the registry, to power your records. Those tools are available and open for anyone to use. Start using the data with your design, with your document requirements, a link to credential and competency data in the registry or on the web. And if you do offer credentials or competencies, you can go ahead and begin publishing that information using our open tools. And of course, take a look at the guide. As I noted, the guide will be changing as more information evolves. And we always appreciate your feedback, so you can let us know what you think about it or what else would be helpful. And that is all for our presentation, and we would love to take questions. If anyone has any questions, you can put them in the chat, or you can unmute and ask away.